going to be in two parts. The first part will be my briefing, and in the second part, the Air Force, before your very eyes, is going to tear the shrouds of secrecy off a program and declassify it right here and discuss it in the open. So that it will be magic of sorts. Let me start with a couple of announcements. Secretary Perry and the German Minister of Defense, Volker Ruhe, will visit Holloman Air Force Base in New Mexico tomorrow to participate in a ceremony to activate the German Air Force Tactical Training Command down there. There'll be 12 Tornado aircraft and approximately 300 German military and civilian personnel assigned to Holloman as part of a weapons instructor and flight training program. This was set up under a 1994 Memorandum of Understanding between the U.S. and Germany. In other words, pilots from the German Air Force will be training in New Mexico. While they're down there, there will be a press conference tomorrow at 12:40 Mountain Daylight Time. If you want more information, you can check with the people out at Holloman, or we can get you information here. Now, this is very exciting. The American Forces Press Service, which writes articles for base newspapers around the world, is now available on the internet. You can get it under Defense Link, or you can go in at http://www.dtic.mil.afps to get these articles, and they're available for anybody who wants them on the internet. Finally, I'd like to bring you up to date on recent events in Liberia. About 3 hours ago, there was an exchange of fire between one of the factions in Liberia and United States Marines who were guarding the embassy compound. This took place in the context of sporadic fighting around the main embassy compound and the Greystone compound, where there are still about 10,000 Liberians. Unidentified fighters fired at the embassy compound. The Marines returned fire. We believe that 2 of the attackers were killed and 1 was wounded. 1 Marine was grazed in the incident, but did not require medical attention. I'd like to use this opportunity to point out that the way to end these problems is to reach a peace agreement between the factions in Monrovia. Assistant Secretary of State George Moose is there now, trying to negotiate a peace agreement. He's been earlier in Europe, in Geneva, working with a new contact group to try to achieve a peace agreement in Liberia. So the first lesson is that the factions should stop fighting and agree to peace, but the second is that the Marines take their security obligations seriously and will protect the embassy as appropriate. With that, I'm ready to take your questions. Charlie.
How many Marines, could you give us a ballpark figure? How many in fact are there?
There's a reinforced rifle company in Monrovia guarding the embassy compound now. Normal rifle company is 150 people. There are about 250 Marines, 276 Marines, I've been told, on the ground in Monrovia. It's the latest in from the Marine Corps. The total MU, the 22nd Marine Expeditionary Unit, is offshore. The total, including the number on the ground in Monrovia, is 2,939 in the 22nd MU. The total number of American military personnel assigned to Liberia now is 3,444. The difference of 505 between the total and the number in the MU is mainly Air Force people who are in the process of breaking down their operation and moving out.
Is this the first exchange of fire and the first wounding on either side that you know of?
This is the first. Of course, there's been fairly intense fighting going on for the last several days between the factions. But this is the first exchange of fire involving Marines. Yes.
Does this involve the ambassador's residence?
It's what's called the Post 7, which I believe is near the ambassador's residence.
It was fired on then, in other words, wasn't.
Well, we don't know, except we only have a fragmentary report, and we don't know what they were aiming at, or if they were aiming, whether this was just random fire. All we know is that fire came in and it was returned.
Just to clarify, this is at the residence, not the embassy.
I'm sorry, I don't know. We will try to find out more specifically where it is. You just better wait until we get more information on where it
What time
was.
that was local over there?
Yeah, 10:30. No, I don't know what time it was local. You can figure that out. It was 10:30 our time. 10:30 our time.
Isn't this the first time there's been the U.S. has discharged weapons, not just Marines, but Army or Marines or Air Force during this recent crisis? You said this is the first time the Marines have returned fire.
I believe it's the first time any American forces in Monrovia have, in this incident, have returned fire.
Are the Marines leaving the compound at all for any reason? Are they out in the city at all looking
My
to-
understanding is they are not, that they are protecting, they are protecting the compound. That's what they're there for.
One Marine was injured slightly.
No, no Marine was injured. One Marine was grazed. He required no medical attention.
If he's grazed, why is he not injured?
It could be his could be his sleeve. I mean, I don't know the details. All I know is they decided that he didn't require medical attention.
The grade usually refers to flesh, not clothing.
I have not seen what happened to the Marine. The Marines have told me that he required no medical attention. They described it as a grazing. They said he didn't require medical attention. I don't know how you define that. I've told you everything I know about it. I can't tell you anything more.
Because he's a Marine. They don't require.
Bullet through his arm.
I'll let you guys advertise the abilities of the Marine Corps. Anything else? Yes.
Can you comment, last week the Advisory Committee on Women in the Service, Stakowitz, recommended that the Pentagon end its association with ROTC programs at schools that discriminate on the basis of gender. Does the department intend to act on that recommendation and specifically to do anything about its relationship with VMI and the Citadel?
I'll take the question. Anything else?
Any comments on what is happening in Bosnia as refugees try to exercise their rights under the Dayton Accords to return to their villages? They are discovering that that is not possible. And now it appears that the military commanders there are preventing them from going back to their villages, especially when it means crossing the zone of separation for fear that it will just stimulate conflict. Doesn't that sort of fly in the face of what the Dayton Accords was supposed to be accomplishing?
The Dayton Accord under Annex Number 7 lays out the policies for dealing with refugees, and it lays out the policies for helping refugees return to their homes. The organizations that are primarily responsible for dealing with refugees are the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, Mrs. Ogata, and her organization. And then there's a new commission set up under the Dayton Accord, a 9-member commission that's a commission for displaced persons. And they are in the process of setting up procedures for refugee return. In cases where those procedures have been followed, we believe that the return has gone smoothly. What we're seeing here tend to be more in the form of demonstrations. And we have asked all sides to be calm. We've asked all sides to try to honor the rules and take actions that aren't designed to provoke the other side. The organizations responsible for enforcing law and order are the parties themselves and their police forces. It is not IFOR's job, as defined in the Dayton Accords, to provide crowd control services. I-4 is available to act to maintain order if requested to do so. And what I-4 has done in these cases is to try to keep the sides separated so the demonstrations don't get out of hand. This has in most cases worked, not in all cases, but that's what I-4 is striving to do.
Did you sit in on the meetings between Lula and the Secretary?
No, I did not.
Would you take the question whether the subject came up, whether the Secretary urged Germany to ride herd over its private companies to make sure that they don't transfer high-tech material to the Libyans building Tarhuna?
Well, I'll take the question. The Secretary himself addressed that at the photo opportunity, and you might go look at the transcript of that. Anything else?
Thank you.
Okay, now the Air Force, right before your eyes, perform this magic.
It's a day that will live in infamy, I'm sure. We're here today to unveil a previously special access required program. This will be an on-the-record briefing, single subject. This is a former technology demonstrator program. Today, we've invited our Assistant Secretary of the Air Force for Acquisition, Mr. Art Money, and his Principal Deputy, Lieutenant General George Molnar, to officiate over this unveiling, if you will. You'll have a press kit when you leave here. It'll have their biographies. It'll have a fact sheet on this particular program and a news release. As part of this, we'll also have about a 3-minute video that they will show, and we'll have some photographs. So with that, I'll turn it over to Mr. Money.
Good afternoon. It's a pleasure to be here today to share with you a program called TACIT BLUE. TACIT BLUE is a program that's been a very well kept secret. It's an aircraft that has not been publicly seen until today. This program has provided the Air Force and the nation with an extraordinary advances in stealth technology. This technology continues to protect our men and women in uniform now and for years to come. An exceptional group of people from the Air Force, the Defense Advanced Research Project Agency, DARPA, and Northrop Corporation teamed together to accomplish this program. What's even more impressive is the fact that this program had such a high return on the relatively small investment, meeting or exceeding all the program's objectives, specifically critical low observable and sensor performance goals. The objectives of TACIT BLUE were to demonstrate key technologies for a surveillance aircraft with a low probability of intercept radar, along with a low observable signature, a low radar cross-section using curved surfaces. We've learned a great deal from the TACIT BLUE program, and this has greatly helped the B-2, today's B-2 bomber. What I'd like to do now is show you a 2-minute video clip, and then General Molnar, who is very familiar with this program, will answer your questions. However we start the video.
TACIT BLUE, one of our most successful technology demonstrator programs.
the United States Air Force, Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, and Northrop teamed up to accomplish one of the most successful technology demonstrator programs in history. TACIT BLUE.
What I'd like to do now is give you some more details of the program, and then I'll be glad to take your questions relative to its performance and what it's done. Let me uncover this, and one comment that I would make to you is that as you look at this later, you'll see some slight differences, in particular in the wing configuration with this and what you saw on the screen. The reason is this was the contractor's depiction of what a production vehicle would have been, an operational vehicle. And in particular, what you will see is if you notice, the wingspan and the others was smaller, more stubby in that, whereas this was a later wing configuration that had been proposed. Just as a starting point, the actual vehicle will be unveiled at Wright-Patterson at the Air Force Museum on the 22nd of May of this year, of '96. It's back there right now going through some cleanup work, if you will, purging of the systems and what have you, so it will be on display at the museum at that time. Now let me back up and give you a little bit of background detail on the program. This was indeed, as Mr. Money commented, an attempt and a successful one at demonstrating the LO technologies for a surveillance airplane. It was actually part of the Pave Mover program, which, as you all know, led to Joint Stars. And so this was going to be a complementary asset that, with its LO signature, was going to allow it to fly closer to the forward line of troops, more at risk, if you will, to look in at second echelon forces. The program was actually began in 1978. It was total program content was $165 million. As mentioned, it was Northrop of Hawthorne, California, as the primary contractor. They got a sole source contract for $136 million, with the other $29 million supporting government cost and test activities over about a 3-year period. The other contractors that participated, and as was mentioned, this was a great team effort between the Air Force and DARPA and also Northrop Corporation. Also with Garrett, who is now, I think, Allied Signal, providing the engines. There were 2 ATF 3-6 engines, which are the same ones that used to be in the Falcon 20 aircraft, so, as a rough size for you. It had a Hughes multi-mode radar in it that was looked at primarily for ground surveillance. And the flight controls, which were a digital quad redundant fly-by-wire system, were designed by General Electric. The aircraft, as you look at it, is a 30,000-pound vehicle. It was designed to operate up in the medium altitude, 25 to 30 plus thousand feet altitude at relatively slow speeds, 250 knots. So it was designed to provide long-term surveillance up in those conditions. As was mentioned, the primary contractor was Northrop. The airplane first flew on the 5th of February, 1982. It flew very successfully for 3 years, actually flying its last flight on the 14th of February, 1985. During that time frame, it flew about 135 sorties for just under 250 hours. It was totally successful in demonstrating not only its signature reduction, and I think, as you probably have noticed, it's designed not only for low RF signature, but it also is designed to have low infrared signature with the upper inlet and a fused rear plane there to mask the IR signature. So it was designed for a balanced signature reduction activity. What was interesting about this approach, if you think about this time frame, this is the same time frame just after the HAV Blue aircraft had flown that the 117 was in development. Of course, the 117 uses a faceted surface to achieve its LO signature. In this case, it's the first attempt, and a very successful one, as mentioned, that led to the B2, to use curvilinear or Gaussian surfaces to achieve signature reduction. So it was a very key element in verifying that technology, that it was well understood and so on, to allow it to go into the B2. Same was true with the LPI, low probability of intercept radar, that showed that, in this case, Hughes could indeed design a radar that would operate in a low probability of intercept mode and use it on a stealthy platform. All those test objectives were indeed successfully completed. Let me just mention some names for you. These are the people that are the main elements of the program. The Air Force Program Manager was a Colonel Jack Twigg, who is since retired. The ARPA Program Manager was a Dr. Alan Atkins. And the Northrop Program Manager, there were really two principal players there. One is a Mr. Steve Smith, and the other is a Dr. John Cashin. And as many of you know, Dr. Cashin had significant responsibility also for the B-2 weapon system. There were a total of 5 pilots that flew the airplane. The first pilot and the contractor pilot was Mr. Dick Thomas. The Air Force pilots consisted of Lieutenant Colonel Ken Dyson, who many of you know also was one of the pilots of the TACIT BLUE aircraft, Lieutenant Colonel Russ Easter, Lieutenant Colonel Don Cornell, and the Major Dan Vanderhorst. And again, I'd just like to emphasize that the key purposes of this program were to demonstrate the curvilinear surface approach to LO technologies, both the RF and then also the IR shielding techniques that were used on this, and also the radar techniques that were used for its low probability of intercept mode of operation. And again, all those objectives were very successfully accomplished. With that, I'd be more than happy to take any questions.
None of those technologies seem to have ended up in the JSTARS. Certainly none of the stealth technologies.
That's correct. The decision was made at the termination of this program that this approach, which was flying much closer to the FLOT with a smaller radar antenna, we could achieve the same degrees of survivability by standing back away with a much larger radar antenna. As you know, the radar antenna on the Joint Stars is upwards of 29 feet, vice a much smaller one here, and obviously that gives you the gain for depth of coverage. So this platform, as it was designed, was going to be a complement. It turned out that it really turned into a test bed because the LO technology has proved to be more valuable than its contribution. That's the reason it never went operational.
Same degree of survivability for less cost.
In the case of the Joint Stars. Yeah, the issue with this is you're going to have to, you would put it closer to the battlefield, as the operational concept was at that point in time. You would use the signature to provide survivability for it. But you've got a much smaller radar antenna, therefore you have less depth of coverage. So it was a balanced.
It would cost more to put that close to the battlefield.
That was the decision at that time. That's correct. That's correct. Please.
Why would it make this public now? The one pilot's retired, and there's a program that last flew over a decade ago. Why? Just because you want to put it in a museum?
No, not at all. Actually, there are a couple reasons. One is that the taxpayers invested money in it, and we're trying to declassify things. We're under a presidential direction to do that. The need to protect the technologies have been driven by two things. They've been driven by the technologies that are incorporated in the B-2 aircraft, and also those technologies that were to have been incorporated in the TSAM program, Tri-Service Standoff Attack Missile. If you look, you'll see a great deal of similarity between the two. Now that both those programs, the latter being canceled, the B-2 being operational, there was no need to protect the technologies. And we're under a presidential directive to declassify these as we can.
But the B-2 was rolled out years ago.
Right.
And the TSAM was canceled years ago.
TSAM was canceled a year and a half ago. And we have been involved with the TSAM as being a potential candidate for some other systems. So the need was there to protect that until that no longer became an issue.
How big was that antenna? How was it
did it look to the side or
Yes,
below?
I'm sorry.
How,
What you see here in depiction is the actual radar is embedded in the side, and it is indeed a side-looking airplane. To scale, this is this airplane is about 56 feet long, and the wingspan's a little less than 50 feet, about 48 feet in the configuration you saw fly here.
did it ever fly off the range in Nellis?
It flew from it flew and tested at a number of locations, Dave.
So there were flights back and forth across the...
It flew and tested at a number of locations.
So was it flown at night? I mean, was that the...
It did not fly at night, as most of our developmental aircraft. It flew in the daytime. It did not intentionally fly in adverse weather. It was a prototype, a demonstrator, so it was equipped not for an operational mission, but for that application, just to prove the technologies.
Was it ever flown overseas anywhere? Out of the continental U.S.?
Flew from a number of locations. Flew and tested.
Why are you being vague about where it flew?
Because we're talking about the airplane, and where it flew isn't the relevant issue to unveiling the airplane.
Did it only fly in a test situation?
Yes, that's correct. No, it only flew, it was a technology demonstrator. It was never an operational aircraft, and the decision was made not to make it operational.
I'm not sure I quite understand the radar. Isn't that a SAR radar if it's supposed to be like the J-stars?
That's correct. It's a side-looking, as the Joint Stars is, obviously. The Joint Stars radar, while it's mounted underneath, still looks out to the side. So it's a multi-mode SAR radar.
So how has it benefited the development of a multi-mode radar for something like maybe like the F-22 or the B-2?
Because it's low probability of intercept. For instance, the Joint Stars radar is not designed to be LPI. It achieves its survivability by putting protection in front of it in the case of barrier caps or other high-value asset protection, or standing off from the threat. The intent was this, to get more in the threat's access area, but provide a low probability of intercept radar so it couldn't be easily detected. And obviously, the B-2 has exploited that technology. Please.
Besides the B-2, I mean, in TSAM, is this being employed in JASM, F-22, anything, JSF, anything
A
else?
lot of the shaping techniques, the use of these curvilinear surfaces and what have you to achieve, obviously have pervaded into a lot of other platforms, like more than likely the various JASM inputs, including possibly even a variant of the TSAM, and also into things like the F-22 and what have you. So clearly we've learned how to use other than faceted surfaces and still achieve the signature reduction. Dave?
That's a wide cockpit, though. Was it a two-place crew?
No, it was good point. It was a single-seat airplane. It was subsonic, as you might imply from looking at it. Again, it was unstable about the pitch axis and also directionally. And so the quad redundant fly-by-wire flight control system provided stability. And the reports from the 5 pilots that flew it said it responded pretty well, but it kind of flew like a big airplane, which is what you would expect.
Have an ejection seat?
Yes, it did. It had a Douglas Aces 2 seat.
And did you only build one? Did you partially build another at all?
We built, the money bought one airplane and bought the frame or structure for another one in case it was lost. It was not, and at the end of the program, the other one was disassembled.
What was your on-station time with this?
The average mission duration that they flew during it was about 2.5 hours.
If there had been an operational version, how much of a crew would it have had?
The intent up front was for it to be a single seat, but to be honest with you, we never got far enough to operationalizing it to go into more detail than that. The decision was made fairly early on that while the LO technology and the radar proved out that achieving the same degree of survivability from a standoff was easily achievable with the larger antennas that you can get on a Joint Stars-like airplane. Dave?
It looks like there's 4 panels, though.
or two on each side. What's the smaller
The,
panel in front?
the focus, in reality, while it's not shown on the model, is a radar antenna, there are E-lint antennas, and there is also a data link antenna, which isn't shown within the fidelity of this particular model. So in reality, as in the case of Joint Stars, it's designed to scan the ground battlefield, data link that in real time back to a ground station, and at the same time collect E-lint information.
So you could put together an electronic order of battle as well?
Exactly, and as a rivet joint or something like that would collect data, it was designed to do that. That part of the system was never tested on a demonstrator. That was their operational concept.
As you did your cost-benefit study to determine whether or not you would go ahead with this technology versus a more traditional airframe, what was it a factor of 2 that it was cheaper to do the J-Stars in the way that you have decided to do it, put it in that kind of airframe? Was it a close call?
I can't tell you that. I don't know. I have not seen the results of that data, and that was quite a while ago. The analysis showed that the Joint Stars approach provided more capability because even in employing this thing, you still had the issue of employing this close to the forward edge of the battle. And if you wanted to employ it in daytime, while it could have good RF and IR signature, it was still a pretty good-sized airplane and could be seen. And so the decision was made that to achieve the same level of survivability overall, we're better off standing off.
So it wasn't necessarily the cost of that airframe.
It was a combination. It was the cost of achieving the solution.
Would it have taken multiple platforms of this aircraft to cover the same sectors that's covered by J-Star?
That's correct. And again, that gets back to the relative size of the radar antenna here, vice a Joint Stars antenna, which gives you a larger field of regard.
The use of this technology and shaping it in an RPV. When it first took off, I thought that's what you had, was a large RPV.
This was not an RPV, and I think at that point in time, I can't speak for the program managers then, but my guess is that the RPV technology probably wasn't mature enough that we thought we could do that. But again, from the very beginning, this was designed as a piloted aircraft.
Could this be the plane that some people referred to as Aurora?
I don't know. I certainly have never referred to it as that, and I don't know of anybody else that has, at least anybody in the military side, certainly.
Well, you won't say where it was flown. Is it possible that members of the general public saw this flying at times?
I guess that's possible. It did fly open air, and it did do other testing. So I guess it's possible people have seen it, but it has been pretty well kept secret. It has been in storage since 1985.
What's the cost of keeping this program so black so long?
Actually, there hasn't been any cost associated with it at all. The airplane has been in storage in a storage building, and all the program files in that have been sealed up. So I don't know of any costs that are associated with it.
Does the $165 million include the operational cost of the test flying, or is that strictly the hardware?
The $165 million included $136 million that went to Northrop and the other contractors to build this vehicle, and as I said, 5/8 of a frame of another. And then the rest of that money was what was used to support the test activities for that 3-year period.
You keep referring to the President's initiative on declassifying things. If the President didn't have that initiative, would you have kept this in the barn for 20 or 30 years and not brought it out?
I don't know. He does have the initiative, and we're really trying to achieve it.
How long did it actually take to build it? Where was it built? And one other question, did the designs ever call for internal carriage or hardpoints for pods or weapons?
It was, the program was started in 1978, and it flew in early February of '82. So the entire time frame, as you see, was well less than 4 years. The focus on it was always surveillance. And so as a result of that, it was not designed for weapons carriage or with external carriage in mind. The construction activity actually occurred in Hawthorne, California at the Northrop facilities.
Give a little context as to why it was sole sourced to Northrop.
Yeah, there were two approaches being surfaced at that time to deal with signature reduction. The one that you see in the 117, which was the faceted approach that the Skunk Works were really pushing forward. This was a competing approach, which was, as I said, based upon these Gaussian surfaces and its ability to distribute the electrical energy. And the focus as a technology demonstrator was to demonstrate that that approach was viable. And as you know, obviously it is, and the B-2 exploits that, as does the F-22 and a lot of other vehicles.
Did HAV-Blue and TACIT BLUE, did they stem from previous calls, requests from the Air Force looking for this type of technology, or were they?
All that came out in that late 70s time frame when we were looking, when we had an understanding, in fact, when Dr. Kaminsky was running that area, and we had an understanding of what we wanted to pursue in the area of RF stealth, and there were these competing or alternative ways of achieving that.
You know, maybe I have to ask the contractor, how many Northrop people were actually involved in this program?
I really don't know. We can probably get that information for you, but I don't have that readily available.
Is it stored at Wright Pat, and where is the other frame that was partially completed?
The second frame was disassembled after the program and disposed of. The airplane is indeed at Wright Pat. It's in one of the hangars there. And before they put it on display, they obviously are doing things like dearming the ejection seat, purging the fuel system and all those things, so it can indeed go on display in a safe manner.
How long has it been at Wright Pat?
About a month.
And where was it before that, in Hawthorne?
It was in storage.
What was the level of secrecy surrounding this? Do you know?
I don't
Was it
understand the level.
top secret? Was it compartmental?
It was secret SAR. That's
Secret.
correct.
What was it?
And it was SAR driven by the LO technologies that were involved.
SAR stands for
Special access required.
Did you make any modifications to the aircraft when you realized it wasn't going to do the surveillance mission, just to test out things for the flying wing?
Yes,
short?
the latter part of its operational time, it was used as a test bed to look at various techniques for signature reduction on the surfaces. A lot of, as I said, and that's what contributed to the evolution that led to the B-2 configurations.
Did you make any visual changes? Change the wing, shorten the tail?
No, the configuration you saw fly was the general characteristic. This was the planned one should it have gone operational, but that was the general shape of it that retained the same throughout the program.
The aircraft use surface material, radar absorbing material, the same as the other shuttle aircraft? Or is it strictly shaped?
No, it certainly used radar absorbent materials. It was an aluminum structure with composite radar absorbent materials on the surface.
What is the aircraft's RCS?
Low.
Comparable to?
It's low. It was a healthy bite, and it's similar in many ways to what the HAV-Blue airplane was.
So can you give us, is that like to a bee, a bird, a bat, a building? What comparable to what?
It's below the bat, and somewhere down in that area. I don't know. I haven't looked at the RCS of a bee recently, so I'm not sure what it is. I think it's probably small, but it is, again, like I said, it's similar to a 117. It was delivered there in a cargo aircraft.
Time for one more question.
What's the process for declassifying something like this? I mean, does someone just wave their magic wand, or do you have to look at each bolt, each piece of paper, debrief each person? What's the political and the military process?
The process is to go through and evaluate the technologies, which are the reasons why it remained classified, and to determine whether or not declassifying it is either going to put those technologies at risk or whether they have already been exposed as a result of going operational with weapon systems. And the process takes probably upwards of 8 months 6 to 8 months to go through the various checks and balances to make sure that indeed the key technologies are protected.
There will be press kits over here as you exit, the pictures and some video.
Do we expect other things like this in the future from the Air Force?
We continue to explore new technologies all the time.